Hi, my name's Camila, and I walked alone into my cousin's wedding while my family snickered behind diamond-rimmed glasses, whispering about the girl who couldn't even find a date. I stood there in my discount store dress, clutching an invitation. They'd barely remembered to send until the moment a billionaire CEO strode through those doors, walked straight to me, and suddenly the room that had laughed at me fell into stunned silence. But what happened next wasn't about revenge or status. It was about a reckoning that had been years in the making. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday, tucked between bills and grocery store flyers like an afterthought. The wedding of Eliza Harrington and Jackson Pierce, embossed in shimmering gold lettering, that caught the late afternoon sunlight streaming through my apartment windows. I traced my fingers over the heavy cardstock, noting how my name was scribbled in hasty ballpoint pen at the bottom. And Camila, if available. If available. As if I had a calendar bursting with social engagements that might prevent me from attending my own cousin's wedding. The parentheses stung more than the afterthought. I was an addition, not a priority. The family member they remembered at the last moment when addressing envelopes. I set the invitation on my kitchen counter and stared at it for a long moment. The Harringtons weren't just family. They were Boston royalty. Old money that flowed through generations like the Charles River, steady, unstoppable, and cutting a path through everything in its way. My mother had been the black sheep who married for love instead of status, choosing my father, a brilliant literature professor with empty pockets and a heart full of poetry. When they died in a car accident 10 years ago, the Harringtons took me in, but never quite took me in. I was the charity project, the orphaned niece they paraded at functions to demonstrate their generosity, while simultaneously ensuring I understood my place, adjacent to the family, never fully within it. I poured myself a cup of tea and pulled out my laptop. My modest one-bedroom apartment was a far cry from the Harrington estate in Beacon Hill, but it was mine. Paid for with the salary I earned as an environmental engineer at a startup focused on sustainable water systems. My work wasn't glamorous or headline-making, but it mattered. I had designed filtration systems now implemented in 3 developing countries, providing clean water to communities that had gone without for generations. Not that the Harringtons would know this. At family gatherings, my Aunt Vivian would pat my hand and ask, "Still playing with your little water projects, dear?" Before turning away to discuss Eliza's latest charity gala appearance in the society pages. 2 days later, my phone rang. Eliza's name flashed across the screen. "Camila, you got the invitation, right?" Her voice was bright, practiced in the art of sounding enthusiastic without actually being so. "Yes, thanks for thinking of me," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "Of course, your family," she said quickly. "Listen, I was thinking, would you mind helping with some of the arrangements? We're short on hands for setting up the welcome packages." I closed my eyes briefly. "When?" "Friday evening, before the rehearsal dinner, and maybe Saturday morning before the ceremony? Nothing major, just arranging gift bags, helping the florist with centerpieces, that sort of thing. Not major enough to warrant a proper invitation months ago like the rest of the guests, but major enough to require my unpaid labor. Still, I heard myself saying, "Sure, I can do that." "Perfect. Oh, and Camila?" Her voice shifted to that particular tone reserved for delivering what the Harringtons considered kindness. "Don't worry about bringing a +1. I know your work keeps you busy." The implication hung in the air like perfume, too strong and impossible to ignore. Not that you could find one anyway. "Right," I said. "See you Friday." After hanging up, I stared at my reflection in the kitchen window. At 32, I wasn't unattractive. Dark eyes that matched my father's, my mother's high cheekbones, and a smile that came easily when I wasn't around my extended family. Relationships had never been my priority. My work consumed me, and after watching how my parents' love had been treated as a defect by the Harringtons, I'd grown cautious about letting people in. Friday arrived quicker than I would have liked. I parked my modest hybrid car amid a sea of luxury vehicles outside the Fairmont Copley Plaza Hotel, where the wedding festivities would unfold over the weekend. The opulence was immediate and overwhelming. Crystal, chandeliers, marble floors, staff in crisp uniforms who seemed to materialize whenever a guest so much as shifted their weight. I found Eliza in a private suite, surrounded by bridesmaids in matching silk robes, all holding flutes of champagne. "Camila, finally!" she called out, waving me over. "The welcome boxes are in that corner. Could you arrange the monogrammed chocolates, the local maple syrup, and the custom hand sanitizers? The labels need to face forward, and make sure the tissue paper has the right amount of fluff." I nodded, setting my bag down and rolling up my sleeves. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. One of the bridesmaids, Madison, I thought, though they all looked similar with their highlighted hair and designer sunglasses perched on their heads, leaned over to whisper something to Eliza. They both glanced at me and giggled. "Oh, and Camila," Eliza added. "The rehearsal dinner tonight is just for the wedding party and immediate family, so you can head home after you finish here. We'll see you at the ceremony tomorrow." I kept my face carefully neutral. Of course. For 3 hours, I arranged gift boxes while the bridal party took selfies, sipped champagne, and discussed their recent vacations to the Maldives and St. Barth's. No one offered me a drink or asked about my life. I was furniture, useful but unremarkable. As I finished the last box, Aunt Vivian swept into the room in a cloud of Chanel No. 5. "Eliza, darling, the Blackwells just arrived and—" She stopped when she spotted me. "Oh, Camila, how practical you look today." I glanced down at my simple black pants and white blouse. Professional, comfortable, appropriate for someone who would be kneeling on the floor arranging gift boxes. "Hello, Aunt Vivian." She barely nodded before turning back to Eliza. Anyway, the Blackwells brought the most exquisite Waterford crystal vase as an early gift. Did you hear that Alexa Blackwell's husband is finalizing that merger with Singapore? Next week? Billions, they're saying. The conversation moved on as if I weren't there. I gathered my things and slipped out, stopping at the hotel desk to ask about tomorrow's schedule. "The ceremony begins at 4 p.m., the concierge informed me. "Guests are requested to arrive by 3:30. "And the seating arrangements?" He checked his tablet. "The immediate family will be in the front rows, of course. Are you with the bride or groom's family?" "Bride. I'm her cousin." His fingers moved across the screen. "Ah, yes, you're at table 27. I didn't need to ask where table 27 was located. If the pattern held from previous Harrington events, it would be near the kitchen doors or the restrooms, close enough to be technically included, far enough to be functionally invisible. That night in my apartment, I laid out my dress for the wedding, a deep emerald silk that I'd saved for months to purchase. It wasn't designer, but it was elegant and brought out the green flecks in my eyes. I'd wear my mother's pearl earrings, the only piece of jewelry I had from her, and style my hair in loose waves. I wasn't dressing up for the Harringtons. I was honoring the person I'd become despite them. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend, Layla. "How's wedding prep with the royal family going?" I smiled, typing back, "About as expected. I've been assigned to Table Siberia, right next to the swinging kitchen doors. Want me to come as your +1? I make an excellent wedding crasher." "Thanks, but I'll survive. Besides, Eliza made it clear I shouldn't bring anyone." "Of course she did. Well, hold your head high tomorrow. Remember who you are." I set my phone down and picked up a small wooden box from my nightstand. Inside was a worn leather bookmark my father had given me before he died. Inscribed on it in his elegant handwriting were the words, "Your worth isn't measured by others' perception of you." I traced the faded letters, feeling a familiar ache. My parents would have been proud of the woman I'd become, even if the Harringtons weren't. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, a perfect October day in Boston. I spent the early hours helping the florist arrange centerpieces in the grand ballroom, meticulously placing white roses and hydrangeas while hotel staff bustled around setting up tables and adjusting lighting. "These are lovely," I remarked to the florist, a kind-faced woman named Ruth. "Thank you," she said, handing me another arrangement. "You have a good eye for balance. Are you in the wedding party?" "No, just family. The cousin." She nodded, seeming to understand the weight behind those simple words. Well, family comes in all forms, doesn't it? Some by blood, some by choice. I smiled gratefully at her perceptiveness. By 3:15, I was back in my apartment, dressed and ready. I checked my reflection one final time, adjusted my mother's pearl earrings, and took a deep breath. "Just be yourself," I whispered. "That's enough." The ceremony space was transformed when I arrived, an indoor garden created with thousands of white flowers, crystal teardrops hanging from the ceiling catching the light like suspended raindrops. Guests in designer wear mingled in the foyer, air-kissing and comparing summer homes. I signed the guest book, my signature looking stark and simple next to the flourishing script of Boston's elite. As I turned toward the ceremony space, I felt eyes on me, not admiring glances, but the subtle evaluation of those measuring worth by label names and family connections. My cousin Jeremy, Eliza's brother, spotted me from across the room. He approached with his wife Stephanie, both holding flutes of pre-ceremony champagne. "Camila, you came alone?" Jeremy's question carried false concern. "I did," I replied simply. Stephanie's smile didn't reach her eyes. "That's brave. Especially since Eliza seated you at table 27. It's practically in another time zone." They both laughed, the sound crystal sharp and practiced. "At least I'll have a quick exit if the speeches get boring," I countered with a calm smile. Jeremy's eyebrows rose slightly, unused to me responding with anything but silent acceptance. Before he could reply, an usher approached to guide guests to their seats. I walked alone down the petal-strewn aisle, aware of the whispers following. Me. The ceremony was as opulent as expected. String quartet, custom vows, a unity ritual involving sand from beaches where both families owned property. I watched Eliza, radiant in a gown that cost more than my yearly rent, pledge her life to Jackson, heir to a hotel empire that complemented the Harrington shipping fortune perfectly. Throughout the ceremony, I felt a strange disconnect. Here was my family, my blood. Yet I had never felt more like an outsider. When the minister asked if anyone objected to the union, I caught Aunt Vivian's sharp glance in my direction, as if expecting the poor relation to cause a scene. I simply smiled back. The reception was held in the grand ballroom, transformed, now with thousands more flowers, a dance floor that appeared to be made of glass, and a 12-piece orchestra. I found my seat at table 27, predictably positioned between the restrooms and a service door, with strangers who seemed as out of place as I was. Jackson's former college roommate, a distant cousin of his who worked as a high school teacher, and an elderly great-aunt who kept asking if I was the wedding planner. From this vantage point, I watched the Harrington world orbit around itself, champagne flowing, diamonds catching light, laughter that sounded like money. I sipped my water and made pleasant conversation with my table mates, refusing to let my seat assignment diminish my dignity. The speeches began after the main course. Eliza's father, my Uncle Richard, stood with practiced authority, speaking of legacy and union between great families. Aunt Vivian followed, elegant in midnight blue, toasting to the perfect match while her eyes skimmed over the crowd, pointedly avoiding my corner. Then came the surprise speaker. Jeremy took the microphone, champagne glass in hand. "Before we continue the festivities," he announced, "I'd like to acknowledge all branches of our family tree." His gaze found me, and something in his smile made my stomach tighten. "Including those who remind us how fortunate the rest of us are." A ripple of uncomfortable laughter moved through the crowd. "My cousin Camila," he continued, gesturing toward my isolated table, "came all by herself today. No date, no family of her own. Just her." "What is it you do again? Something with pipes?" The laughter grew louder. I sat perfectly still, my face a careful mask. "But that's what makes family special, isn't it? We include everyone, even when they don't quite fit." Aunt Vivian nodded approvingly. Uncle Richard chuckled. Eliza, at the head table, had the decency to look slightly embarrassed, but she didn't intervene. "So here's to Camila," Jeremy concluded, raising his glass. "Walking in alone today, just like she does everything else." The toast was met with polite applause and more laughter. I took a slow, deliberate sip of water, refusing to drop my gaze or shrink in my seat. The teacher next to me squeezed my hand under the table in silent support. I excused myself shortly after, needing a moment of solitude. In the ornate bathroom, I stood before the mirror, looking at my reflection. My mother's eyes stared back at me, strong, resolute. I reached into my clutch and pulled out my father's bookmark, running my thumb over the inscription. "Your worth isn't measured by others' perception of you." I straightened my shoulders, reapplied my lipstick, and prepared to return to the ballroom with my dignity intact. That's when my phone buzzed with a text message. "I'm outside the hotel. Heard what happened. Want company for the rest of this circus?" It was from Gabriel Chen, the founder and CEO of Aquavita Global, the company that had recently approached me about joining their international water sustainability initiative. We'd met at a conference 3 months ago and had been in professional contact since. I hadn't mentioned the wedding to him. He must have heard from our mutual colleague, Layla. I texted back, "You're in Boston? I thought you were in Singapore until next week." Finished early. Layla mentioned you might need friendly reinforcement. No pressure, just an offer. I hesitated, then typed, "Actually, that would be wonderful. East entrance?" Already there. I made my way through the hotel corridors, away from the reception and toward the east entrance. Gabriel stood outside, impossibly tall and composed, in a perfectly tailored suit that whispered of wealth rather than shouting it. His success story was legendary in our industry, the son of Chinese immigrants who built a water purification startup in his garage and transformed it into a global enterprise valued at billions, all before turning 40. But what had always struck me about Gabriel wasn't his wealth or success. It was his genuine passion for solving water scarcity issues and his respect for the engineers who worked on the ground. "You didn't have to come," I said as I approached. His dark eyes were warm with concern. "I was planning to call you Monday about the Singapore project anyway. Thought I might as well do it in person." He paused, studying my face. "Are you all right?" "Just family being family," I replied with a shrug that aimed for nonchalance but probably missed. Gabriel nodded, understanding in his gaze. Family can be the deepest wound or the strongest foundation, sometimes both. A server passed with a tray of champagne. Gabriel took 2 glasses, handing one to me. "To surviving family functions?" he offered. I clinked my glass against his. "And to having unexpected allies." We stood there for a moment, a pocket of calm in the swirl of the wedding. Through the windows, I could see the reception continuing. The dance floor now filled, the orchestra playing something classical and expensive-sounding. "We could leave," Gabriel suggested. "Find a quiet restaurant. discuss the Singapore project over real food instead of those tiny fancy appetizers that leave everyone secretly hungry. The offer was tempting: escape, professional conversation, respect. But something inside me resisted. "Actually," I said slowly, "would you mind coming in with me?" Just for a little while. His eyebrows rose slightly, but he nodded. "Lead the way." As we re-entered the ballroom, I felt a shift in the atmosphere, like a sudden change in barometric pressure. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Heads turned. Eyes widened in recognition, not of me, but of the man beside me. Gabriel Chen wasn't just wealthy, he was recognizable. His company had been featured in Fortune, Forbes, and Time. He'd spoken at Davos and consulted with the UN on global water initiatives. His presence at a wedding like this, unexpected, unannounced, created an immediate ripple effect. I felt Jeremy's gaze lock onto us first, his champagne glass freezing halfway to his mouth. Then Aunt Vivian, who actually gasped audibly. Uncle Richard straightened his posture, banker's instincts kicking in at the proximity of serious money. Even Eliza, in the middle of her first dance, faltered slightly when she spotted us. But I wasn't focused on their reactions. I was focused on walking back to table 27 with my head high, Gabriel beside me not as a shield or a status symbol, but as a reminder that the world was so much larger than the Harrington sphere. "This is my table," I said when we reached the back corner. Gabriel pulled out my chair with a smile. "Perfect. I love being near the exits. Makes for a quick getaway if needed." The teacher's eyes widened in recognition. The elderly great-aunt leaned over to stage whisper, "Is that Gabriel Chen, the water billionaire?" "Just Gabriel is fine," he replied with a warm smile, extending his hand to each of my table mates. "And you are?" As he engaged my table in genuine conversation, asking the teacher about educational initiatives in her district, discussing gardening with the great-aunt, I noticed a steady stream of guests finding reasons to walk past our table. Phones discreetly captured photos. Whispers circulated. Within minutes, Jeremy was making his way toward us, his smile stretched wide. "Camila, you didn't mention you were bringing such a distinguished guest," he said, extending his hand to Gabriel. "Jeremy Harrington. I'm the bride's brother and Camila's cousin." Gabriel shook his hand briefly. "Gabriel Chen. I'm a colleague of Camila's." "Colleague? I didn't realize." Jeremy's gaze darted between us, recalculating. "Camila's never mentioned her professional connections." "That's because you've never asked," I said simply. A flash of irritation crossed Jeremy's face before his social mask slipped back into place. "Well, Mr. Chen, you really shouldn't be seated all the way back here. Let me arrange for you both to join the family table." Gabriel looked to me, clearly, leaving the decision in my hands. "We're comfortable here, thank you," I replied. "I've already made friends with my table mates." The elderly great-aunt nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, we were just discussing my hydrangeas. Did you know Mr. Chen has developed a rainwater collection system for home gardens?" Jeremy blinked, wrong-footed by my refusal. Before he could respond, Aunt Vivian materialized at his side, elegant as a shark. "Gabriel Chen," she said, her voice honeyed with recognition. "What an unexpected pleasure. I'm Vivian Harrington, mother of the bride. We're absolutely honored to have you join our celebration." Gabriel stood politely. "Mrs. Harrington, congratulations on your daughter's marriage." "You simply must join us at the family table," she insisted, shooting me a look that managed to be both calculating and warning. "I understand you're here with my niece?" "I am," Gabriel confirmed. "Camila and I have been discussing her innovative filtration system design. Did you know it's being implemented across 3 continents now?" Aunt Vivian's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second. "Camila's water project?" How interesting. More than interesting, Gabriel continued. Revolutionary, actually. Her design has reduced implementation costs by 60% while improving filtration efficiency. That's why I'm here in Boston, to finalize her appointment as Director of Global Initiatives for Aquavita. The title hung in the air, impressive, weighty, completely unknown to my family who had never bothered to ask about my work beyond vague references to playing with pipes. Aunt Vivian recovered quickly. Well, of course, we've always known Camila was clever with her. Engineering. Such a unique path for a Harrington. I'm not surprised you recognized her talent early, Gabriel said smoothly. Family support is invaluable for innovation. His words were perfectly polite, but his eyes, shrewd, observant, suggested he wasn't fooled by her retroactive pride. By now, a small crowd had gathered around our table. Uncle Richard approached, hand outstretched. "Richard Harrington," he announced. "I believe we may have crossed paths at the Economic Forum in New York last year." They hadn't, but Gabriel shook his hand anyway. "Mr. Chen was just telling us about Camilla's appointment as a director at his company," Aunt Vivian interjected, her tone suggesting she'd known about this all along. Uncle Richard's eyebrows shot up. "Director? Well, that's unexpected." "Only if you haven't been paying attention," Gabriel replied, his tone pleasant but pointed. A server appeared at that moment, offering fresh champagne. As glasses were distributed, I felt a strange calm settle over me. For years, I had sought the Harringtons' approval, their acknowledgement. Now, watching them scramble to recalibrate, their perception of me based solely on Gabriel's presence, I realized how hollow that validation would be. Eliza appeared, radiant in her wedding gown, Jackson at her side. "Is it true?" she asked, looking between Gabriel and me. "You're working together?" "Camilla's been consulting on our Southeast Asia project for months," Gabriel explained. "She's brilliant at creating solutions that work with local resources and communities." Eliza looked at me with new eyes. Not warm, exactly, but reassessing. "You never mentioned this." "You never asked," I replied softly. The moment stretched between us. Years of dismissal acknowledged in 4 simple words. The orchestra struck up a new song, breaking the tension. Jackson, ever the diplomat, suggested everyone return to enjoying the reception. As the crowd dispersed, I turned to Gabriel. "Thank you," I said quietly. "But you didn't have to do that." "Do what? Tell the truth about your work?" He smiled. "I didn't say anything that wasn't factual." "Including the director position?" "Especially that. It's why I wanted to meet in person. The paperwork is ready whenever you are." I stared at him, processing this information. "You came to Boston to offer me a job?" "I came to Boston to finalize your appointment," he corrected. "Layla mentioned you'd be tied up with family this weekend, so I thought I'd wait until Monday. Then she texted about what happened at the reception and—" He shrugged. Timing changed. The elderly great-aunt leaned forward. "Does this mean you two aren't dating? Because I was already planning your wedding in my head." Gabriel laughed, a genuine sound that lightened something in my chest. "Mrs. Agatha, dear, just Agatha." "Agatha, Camila and I have a professional relationship, built on mutual respect. Though I wouldn't rule out dinner conversations that extend beyond water filtration systems." He glanced at me, a question in his eyes. I felt a smile form, the first genuine one of the evening. "I wouldn't rule that out either," I replied. As the night continued, something shifted in the Harrington ecosystem. Family members who had previously overlooked me now found reasons to approach our table. Cousins suddenly remembered shared childhood memories. Aunts mentioned how they'd always said Camila would make something of herself. I accepted their attention politely, but without the desperate gratitude they might have expected. When Jeremy attempted to make another speech, this one highlighting our close family bonds, I simply raised my water glass with a knowing smile that made him falter mid-sentence. Near midnight, as the reception began winding down, Gabriel and I slipped away from the table. We walked through the hotel's garden, illuminated by strings of fairy lights that reflected in the fountain. "They'll be different with you now," he observed. "Your family." I nodded, watching the play of light on water. "Yes, but I'm not sure I want what they're now willing to give." "What do you want, Camila?" I thought about the question. Simple, yet profound. Recognition for who I actually am, not who they wish I was, or who they think I know. Connection based on truth, not convenience. I paused. To stop trying to earn a place at a table where I was never truly welcome. Gabriel nodded thoughtfully, his gaze meeting mine. "Those are things worth wanting. True recognition can't be bought or performed." We continued walking along the illuminated path, away from the reception's lingering sounds. For the first time that evening, I felt like I could breathe fully. "So, Singapore," I said finally. "When would I start?" 3 weeks. Enough time to wrap up your current projects and prepare for the move. He smiled. "Unless you need more time?" I thought about my small apartment, my few possessions, the life I'd built independent of the Harrington name. 3 weeks is perfect. As we reached the end of the garden path, Gabriel's phone buzzed. He checked it briefly. "My driver's here. Can I offer you a ride home?" "Thank you, but I drove." I gestured vaguely toward the parking garage. "I should say goodnight to Eliza anyway." Gabriel nodded. "Of course, I'll call Monday to discuss details." He hesitated, then added, "For what it's worth, Camila, I've worked with engineers and executives around the world. Your talent isn't just rare, it's transformative. Your family may not see that, but everyone at Aquavita does." His words settled around me like a warm shawl against the October chill. After he left, I made my way back to the ballroom to say my goodbyes. The crowd had thinned, but the Harrington inner circle remained. Aunt Vivian holding court near the cake table, Uncle Richard deep in conversation with potential business connections, Jeremy and Stephanie networking with Jackson's investment banker friends. Eliza spotted me first. She broke away from a group of bridesmaids and approached, her wedding gown rustling expensively with each step. "You're leaving?" she asked, her tone different now, careful, calculating. "Yes, congratulations again. It was a beautiful ceremony." She nodded, glancing toward where Gabriel had exited. "So, you and Gabriel Chen are colleagues," I finished for her. Soon to be more formally. "Right." She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "You know, Camila, you could have told us about your career. We would have been supportive." The revision of history was so swift it almost gave me whiplash. I studied my cousin's face. The person who had scribbled my name as an afterthought on an invitation, who had seated me by the restrooms, who had never once in 15 years asked about my work with genuine interest. "Would you have been?" I asked softly. Her confidence wavered under the simple question. "Of course. We're family." "Family," I repeated, tasting the word. "Eliza, do you know what countries are implementing my filtration system?" She blinked. Well, Gabriel mentioned something about 3 continents. Ethiopia, Cambodia, and Peru, I supplied. The first installation was completed last year. There was a ceremony. I sent photos to the family email group. "Oh, well, I must have missed. I've presented at 4 international conferences in the past 2 years. Published 6 papers on sustainable water solutions. Was interviewed by National Geographic last summer." With each achievement I listed, her expression shifted, discomfort giving way to genuine surprise. "I didn't know," she admitted finally. "You didn't ask," I replied, not unkindly. But more importantly, you didn't want to know. None of you did. The truth hung between us, impossible to dismiss now that it had been spoken. I'm sorry, she said, and for once, I thought she might actually mean it. I nodded, accepting the apology without making it easier for her. I hope you and Jackson are very happy together. Good night, Eliza. As I turned to leave, she called after me. Will you be at Christmas this year? Aunt Vivian is already planning. I paused, considering the annual Harrington Christmas extravaganza, the forced carols, the professional photographer, the coordinated outfits, the carefully curated guest list designed to impress and intimidate. I'll be in Singapore, I said simply. The drive back to my apartment was quiet, just the gentle hum of my car's engine and the occasional passing headlights. Boston slept under a canopy of stars, the skyline a familiar silhouette against the night sky. I'd spent my entire life in this city, always in the shadow of the Harrington name without ever truly belonging to it. The thought of leaving should have terrified me. Instead, it felt like setting down a heavy suitcase I'd been carrying for too long. I woke Sunday morning to a flurry of notifications on my phone, text messages from distant relatives who hadn't spoken to me in years, LinkedIn connection requests from Harrington business associates, 3 voicemails from Aunt Vivian, each more effusive than the last, culminating in an invitation to Sunday brunch at her home. Most surprising was an email from Uncle Richard, with the subject line, Family Investment Opportunity. The message was brief but pointed. He'd be interested in discussing potential family backing for any entrepreneurial ventures I might be considering. I set the phone aside without responding to any of them. Instead, I made coffee and stood by my apartment window watching the city wake up. The morning light painted the brick buildings golden, transforming ordinary streets into something almost magical. My doorbell rang just after 10 a.m. When I opened it, I found a delivery person holding an enormous arrangement of white orchids. Camila Harrington? He asked. I nodded, accepting the heavy vase and the card attached. After setting the flowers on my kitchen counter, I opened the envelope. To new beginnings and long overdue recognitions, looking forward to our Singapore adventure. Gabriel. I smiled, running my fingers over the embossed card. It wasn't the gesture itself that touched me. I'd received flowers before, but the timing. Gabriel had sent these before knowing whether I'd accept the position, before the Harringtons had reassessed my value. They weren't a reaction to last night's events, but a genuine acknowledgement of what he'd seen in me all along. My phone rang. Again. Aunt Vivian's name flashed on the screen for the 4th time that morning. With a deep breath, I answered. Good morning, Aunt Vivian. Camila, darling. Her voice was honeyed, eager. I've been trying to reach you. We're having a little impromptu gathering at the house. Just family and a few close friends. Brunch. Mimosas. Nothing formal. We'd love for you to join us. The invitation hung in the air. 6 months ago, even yesterday, I would have accepted immediately, grateful for the inclusion, hopeful that this time would be different. Thank you for thinking of me, I said carefully. But I have plans today. Plans? What could be more important than family? The edge in her voice was subtle but unmistakable. My life, Aunt Vivian. My choices. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken calculations. When she spoke again, her approach shifted. Gabriel Chen would be welcome too, of course. I'm sure everyone would love to hear more about your professional connection. And there it was, the real invitation. Not to me, but to the billionaire they thought I could deliver to their doorstep. I'll let him know, but as I said, we both have prior commitments. My tone remained polite but firm. I should go now. Give my best to everyone. Camila, wait. I ended the call, a small act of self-determination that felt monumental. The rest of Sunday passed in peaceful productivity. I reviewed the preliminary contract Gabriel had emailed, researched housing options in Singapore, and began a list of what to keep, what to sell, what to ship. By evening, I'd mapped out a timeline for my transition and drafted resignation letters for my current position. Monday morning, I arrived at my office earlier than usual. The startup where I'd worked for the past 4 years occupied 3 floors of a converted textile factory in Cambridge, exposed brick walls, industrial windows, and an open floor plan filled with engineers and environmental scientists passionate about making a difference. My desk was in the northeast corner, facing a wall covered in maps marking implementation sites around the world. Little blue pins for completed projects, green for those in progress, yellow for assessment phase. A visual representation of work that mattered, lives changed through access to clean water. I was reviewing final calculations for a project in Myanmar when Layla appeared, 2 coffee cups in hand. "So," she said, setting 1 cup on my desk and pulling up a chair. "I heard interesting things happened at the wedding." I glanced up with a smile. "You mean after you texted Gabriel about Jeremy's toast?" She didn't look remotely guilty. "Hey, I simply mentioned to a mutual acquaintance that my brilliant friend was dealing with family drama. What happened after that was entirely organic." "Organic like fertilizer," I teased, but there was no heat in it. "Details," she demanded, leaning forward. "What happened when he showed up? Did the Harringtons collectively faint? Did Jeremy choke on his champagne? Please tell me Aunt Vivian's face did that thing where she tries to smile but looks like she's passing a kidney stone." I laughed, recounting the previous night's events while Layla alternately gasped and cackled. When I mentioned the director, "Position," she squealed loud enough to turn heads across the office. "I knew he was considering you for something big, but Director of Global Initiatives? Camila, that's incredible." She paused, studying my face. "You are taking it, right?" "I am," I confirmed. 3 weeks from now, I'll be moving to Singapore." Her excitement dimmed slightly. "Singapore? Wow. That's far." "It is," I acknowledged, "but it's also an opportunity I can't pass up." Layla nodded, understanding replacing her momentary disappointment. "Of course you can't, and I'm going. To visit you so often you'll get sick of me." "Not possible," I assured her. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings and project handovers. I scheduled time with my supervisor for the following morning to submit my resignation formally. By the time I left the office, evening had settled over Cambridge, painting the skyline in shades of purple and gold. As I crossed the parking lot, my phone rang. The screen displayed a number I didn't recognize. "Hello?" "Camila, it's Jeremy." My cousin's voice was uncharacteristically hesitant. "Do you have a moment?" I paused beside my car. "I'm just leaving. Work. What can I do for you, Jeremy?" Well, this is a bit awkward." He cleared his throat. "I wanted to apologize for my toast yesterday. It was inappropriate and unkind." The apology was so unexpected, I almost dropped my keys. In 32 years, I had never heard Jeremy Harrington apologize for anything. "I appreciate that," I said carefully. "Also," he continued, "I was hoping we could meet for coffee this week. There's a business opportunity I'd like to discuss. Nothing major, just some thoughts about potential collaboration between my investment group and Aquavita, given your new position." And there it was, the real purpose of the call. Not remorse, but opportunity. "I don't start at Aquavita for 3 weeks, I replied. "And when I do, any business discussions would need to go through proper channels." Of course, he backpedaled quickly. "This would just be preliminary. Family helping family, you know. The Harringtons have always supported each other's endeavors." The rewriting of history was dizzying in its audacity. I leaned against my car, suddenly tired. Jeremy, for 15 years you've treated me like an afterthought. You've made jokes, at my expense, dismissed my work, and yesterday you publicly mocked me at your sister's wedding. The only thing that's changed since then is your perception of my access to someone wealthy and influential. Silence stretched between us. When he spoke again, his tone had hardened. I was trying to make amends, Camila. There's no need to be vindictive. It's not vindictive to state facts, I replied, and it's not an apology if it comes with an agenda. Fine, forget I called. The familiar dismissive Jeremy had returned. But remember, in business, burning bridges isn't wise. I'm not burning bridges, Jeremy. I'm simply not building ones under false pretenses. I ended the call and got into my car, exhaling slowly. The conversation left a bitter taste, but also a strange sense of liberation. For the first time, I had spoken my truth to a Harrington without fearing the consequences. That evening, I began sorting through my apartment. It was cathartic, deciding what truly mattered enough to bring into my new life. The bookmark from my father, yes. The formal family portrait from 3 Christmases ago where I'd been positioned half-hidden behind Jeremy. No. As I worked, I thought about the Harringtons' sudden interest in my career, my connections, my future. It would have been validating once, this belated recognition. Now it felt hollow, a confirmation of what I'd always suspected but hadn't wanted to admit. Their acceptance was conditional, based not on who I was but on what I could provide. My phone buzzed with a text from Gabriel. Contract is in your email. No pressure to sign immediately. Questions welcome. I smiled, appreciating the space he was giving me to make my own decision. Another text followed. Also, your aunt called my office 3 times today. Impressive persistence. I groaned. I'm so sorry. What did she want? To invite me to a small family dinner this weekend. I declined, citing international travel. Are you actually traveling? To Singapore, yes. Would you like to join? Pre-relocation site visit. Completely optional, but might help with housing decisions. I considered the offer. A weekend away from Boston and the Harringtons' sudden attention. A chance to see my future home through knowledgeable eyes. Yes, I typed back. I'd like that. Tuesday morning, I submitted my resignation letter. My supervisor, Dr. Helen Chen, no relation to Gabriel, was disappointed but unsurprised. I always knew we couldn't keep you forever, she said, smiling. Sadly. Aquavita is lucky to have you. I've learned so much here, I told her sincerely. This team gave me a chance when my resume was thin and my confidence was thinner. Helen nodded. I remember the day you interviewed. 27 years old, nervous but so passionate about water accessibility. You had this fire when you talked about your field research in Ethiopia. You took a chance on me, I acknowledged. No, she corrected gently. I recognized talent and dedication. There's a difference. The distinction stayed with me as I began transitioning my projects to colleagues. Helen had seen my potential, not because of who I knew or what family I came from, but because of what I had accomplished and what I could contribute. It was a stark contrast to the Harrington approach to evaluation. By Wednesday, word of my resignation had spread throughout the office. Colleagues stopped by my desk with congratulations and good wishes. Several asked about Gabriel Chen, having connected the dots between my new position and the Billionaire CEO known for water innovation. Is he really as brilliant as they say? Asked Marcus from the engineering team. More so, I replied honestly. And genuinely committed to the work. It's not just business for him. And is he single? Teased Sophia from the grant writing department, wiggling her eyebrows suggestively. I felt my cheeks warm. Our relationship is professional. She hummed skeptically. Professional with potential. I saw those orchids he sent. News traveled fast in a small office. That evening, as I packed more of my apartment, my phone rang again. Uncle Richard's name appeared on the screen. I briefly considered letting it go to voicemail, but decided to face whatever this was directly. "Hello, Uncle Richard." "Camila," he greeted, his businessman's voice in full effect. "I understand congratulations are in order. Director at Aquavita, quite an achievement." "Thank you," I replied, continuing to fold clothes into a suitcase as we spoke. "I've been looking into Chen's company. Impressive growth trajectory. Their recent expansion into desalination technology is particularly interesting from an investment perspective." I said nothing, waiting for him to reach his point. "I'm hosting a dinner next Thursday for some key financial players," he continued. "I'd like you to attend. Bring Gabriel if he's available. It would be a good opportunity for him to meet some potential investors." The presumption was breathtaking. Uncle Richard, who had never shown interest in my career or accomplishments, now assumed he could leverage my professional connection for his financial benefit. "Aquavita is privately held," I informed him. "Gabriel isn't seeking outside investors. Everyone's seeking investors, Camila. It's just a matter of the right offer and the right connections." His tone was patronizing, as if explaining business basics to a child. The Harrington network could be valuable to him. If Gabriel wanted access to the Harrington network, he could have pursued it at any time in the past decade, I pointed out. "He's quite capable of making his own connections." Uncle Richard chuckled, a sound devoid of actual humor. "You're missing the point. This isn't just about him. It's about you, about cementing your place in both worlds. The Harringtons can open doors even for someone at Gabriel Chen's level. Think strategically." "I am thinking strategically," I replied calmly. "I'm considering what would benefit Aquavita's mission, not what would benefit the Harrington investment portfolio." His sigh was heavy with disappointment. "I'd hoped you'd grown beyond this. Idealism. Water charity is commendable, but real impact requires capital and connections. Clean water isn't charity, Uncle Richard. It's a fundamental human right. And Aquavita has plenty of capital and connections. Ethical ones." The conversation ended shortly after, with neither of us satisfied. As I set down my phone, I realized something important. I was no longer seeking the Harringtons' approval. More significantly, I was no longer afraid of their disapproval. The realization was both freeing and melancholy. The final acknowledgement that the family connection I had hoped for all these years would never materialize in the way I had wanted. Not because I was insufficient, but because their metric for measuring worth was fundamentally flawed. Thursday brought another shift in the family dynamic. Cousin Eliza called, her honeymoon apparently abbreviated or interrupted for more pressing matters. "Camila, I've been thinking about our conversation at the wedding," she began, voice bright with forced warmth. "You were right. We haven't been attentive to your career. That changes now. I've mentioned you to the board of the Harrington Foundation. They're very interested in your water work." The Harrington Foundation was the family's tax deduction vehicle, a philanthropic organization that funded arts initiatives, education programs for promising youth, meaning those with the right connections, and occasional environmental projects, selected more for their PR value than their impact. "That's kind of you," I said neutrally, "but I'll be fully committed to Aquavita's projects." "Oh, this wouldn't be a major time investment," she assured me. "Just lending your name as a technical advisor, maybe an appearance at the annual gala. The foundation would make a modest donation to one of your projects, of course." "My projects aren't mine anymore," I reminded her. "They belong to the communities they serve." Eliza's patience frayed slightly. "Camila, I'm trying to include you in the family legacy, to make up for past oversights, by using my professional credentials to legitimize the foundation's environmental giving. By recognizing your expertise," she countered, though we both knew the distinction was semantic at best. I softened my tone, realizing that in her way, Eliza might genuinely believe she was extending an olive branch. I appreciate the thought, Eliza, but my focus needs to be on my new position. Perhaps we can revisit this conversation in a year, once I'm established at Aquavita. It was a deflection, not a commitment, but it seemed to satisfy her for now. As we ended the call, she added, "You're coming to Sunday dinner at Mother's, right? She's invited Gabriel too." "We'll be in Singapore this weekend," I replied, a small thrill running through me at the simple truth of that statement. "Business trip." "Singapore? Together?" Her voice rose with interest. "So it is more than professional. It's a pre-relocation visit," I clarified, "completely professional." "If you say so," she sang skeptically. "Well, travel safely, and Camila, I really am proud of you." The words should have meant more. Once they would have. Now they felt like too little, too late. Appreciation extended not to the person I was, but to the connection I represented. Friday morning arrived with a gentle knock on my apartment door. When I opened it, I found Gabriel standing there, casual in dark, jeans and a simple blue button-down rather than his usual business attire. "Ready for Singapore?" he asked, a smile warming his eyes. I gestured to my single suitcase and carry-on bag. As ready as I can be for a weekend trip to the other side of the world. His driver waited downstairs, ready to take us to the private airfield where Gabriel's company jet was prepared for departure. The reality of my new circumstances hit me as we drove through Boston, the skyscrapers and historic buildings that had framed my entire life now becoming a temporary backdrop rather than my permanent setting. "Second thoughts?" Gabriel asked, noticing my gaze lingering on the cityscape. "Not about the job," I clarified. "Just processing the change. I've never lived anywhere but Massachusetts." He nodded. "The first move is always the hardest. After that, home becomes more about purpose than place." "Is that how it was for you? When you left Chicago for Silicon Valley?" "Somewhat. Though, my circumstances were different." His expression grew thoughtful. "I wasn't leaving family behind. I was searching for opportunity. My parents had sacrificed everything to give me education and possibilities they never had. Success wasn't just personal ambition, it was honoring their sacrifice." There was something comforting about his perspective, the idea that moving forward could be an act of honoring rather than abandoning. The private jet was elegant but understated, designed for function rather than ostentation. As we settled into the comfortable seats, Gabriel handed me a thick folder. "Housing options," he explained. "The company maintains several service departments for executives, but I've also included some independent rentals if you prefer more separation between work and home." I flipped through the glossy photographs of sleek high-rises with infinity pools, garden terraces, and stunning city views. "These are beautiful." "We'll tour a few this weekend," he promised. Singapore is a small island, but each neighborhood has its own character. As the jet took off, lifting effortlessly above the clouds, I felt a strange mixture of trepidation and excitement. The world was literally opening up beneath me, vast and full of possibility. For the first time in years, I was making choices, based solely on what I wanted, not on what might finally earn the Harringtons' approval. The flight was long but comfortable, filled with productive discussion about the Singapore projects and occasional comfortable silences. Gabriel was a considerate travel companion, neither demanding conversation nor disappearing into work to the exclusion of all else. We landed in Singapore just as dawn was breaking over the city-state, the skyline emerging from darkness in a spectacle of glass and steel. A company car met us at the private aviation terminal, whisking us to a hotel in the Marina Bay area, where Aquavita maintained a corporate suite. "Rest for a few hours," Gabriel suggested, as staff efficiently delivered our luggage to separate rooms within the suite. "I've arranged for a driver at noon to show you the housing options." I nodded gratefully. exhaustion catching up with me despite the comfortable flight. "Thank you for arranging all this." He smiled. "Get some sleep. Camila, the city will still be here when you wake up." I slept deeply for several hours, waking to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of Singapore's famous gardens by the bay. The massive super trees, vertical gardens that towered over the landscape, stood like sentinels from a futuristic forest. After showering and changing, I found Gabriel in the suite's living area, working on his laptop. He looked up when I entered. "How did you sleep?" "Better than expected," I admitted. "The view is incredible." "One of the things I love about Singapore," he said, closing his laptop. "They've managed to balance urban development with green spaces better than almost any city I've seen." Our driver arrived precisely at noon, beginning a tour that would shape my understanding of my future home. We visited 3 potential apartments, each stunning in its own way, but the second captured my heart immediately. Located in the Tiong Bahru neighborhood, it combined modern amenities with proximity to one of the city's most charming heritage districts. The rooftop garden offered views of both the downtown skyline and the local community, a perfect metaphor for bridging worlds. "This one," I said simply, standing on the balcony. Gabriel joined me, leaning against the railing. "Good choice. Tiong Bahru has character. Great food, too. Some of the best hawker stalls in the city." After finalizing the rental paperwork, Gabriel suggested an early dinner at a local restaurant. As we walked through the neighborhood, I was struck by the seamless blend of traditional shophouses and modern cafes, the elderly residents playing checkers in the park alongside young professionals with laptops. "It feels alive," I observed, "not like a museum or a corporate showcase." "That's Singapore," Gabriel replied, "always evolving while honoring its roots." The restaurant was small and unassuming from the outside, but inside, the aromas of spices and herbs created an immediate sense of welcome. Gabriel spoke briefly to the owner in Mandarin, resulting in a nod of recognition and our being ushered to a table in a quiet corner. "I hope you don't mind. I asked them to bring a selection of local specialties," he said as we settled in. "First-time visitors can find the menus overwhelming." "I appreciate the guidance," I assured him. As the dishes began arriving, chili, crab, laksa, satay with peanut sauce rich enough to make me close my eyes in appreciation, our conversation shifted from work to more personal territory. "Tell me something I wouldn't know from your resume," Gabriel suggested, refilling my water glass. I considered the question. "I used to want to be a poet. When I was younger, I filled notebooks with verses about water, its movement, its necessity, its absence." "What changed?" "My parents died," I said simply. And suddenly, writing about water's importance wasn't enough. I needed to do something tangible with it. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Creation from loss. It's a powerful motivator." "What about you?" I asked. "Something not in your Forbes profile?" A smile touched his lips. "I can't swim." "What?" I stared at him in disbelief. "You've built a global water technology company, and you can't swim?" He shrugged, a rare glimpse of self-consciousness crossing his features. "Never learned. Growing up in inner-city Chicago, swimming pools weren't exactly accessible. By the time I could afford lessons, I was too embarrassed to take them." "The great Gabriel Chen, embarrassed?" I teased gently. "Shocking, I know." His smile was self-deprecating. "I can negotiate billion-dollar deals without blinking, but put me in the deep end of a pool." "I could teach you," I offered impulsively. "I was a lifeguard through college." Something warm flickered in his eyes. "I might take you up on that." The moment stretched between us, comfortable yet charged with possibility. Then his phone buzzed with an incoming call. He glanced at the screen, his expression shifting to professional neutrality. "I should take this. Excuse me. As he stepped outside to take the call, I found myself watching him through the window, the way he carried himself with quiet confidence, not the performed authority of Uncle Richard or Jeremy's brash entitlement, but something more authentic and earned. When he returned, there was a slight tension around his eyes. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Just business," he replied, though something in his tone suggested otherwise. Before I could inquire further, he changed the subject, asking about my impressions of Singapore so far. The evening concluded with a walk along the nearby river, the city lights reflecting in the water like scattered stars. We discussed the upcoming week's relocation logistics, the projects awaiting me in Singapore, the cultural adjustments I might expect. It was only when we returned to the hotel suite that Gabriel seemed to come to a decision about whatever had been troubling him. "There's something you should know," he said as we stood in the living area. "That call earlier was from my assistant. Your aunt has been persistently contacting our Boston office." I sighed, unsurprised but embarrassed. "I'm sorry about that." "Don't apologize for other people's actions," he said firmly. "But there's more. She apparently gave an interview to Boston Business Monthly suggesting a partnership between the Harrington Foundation and Aqua Vita, with you as the connecting bridge." My stomach dropped. "She did what?" Gabriel handed me his tablet, open to an online article. The headline read, "Harrington heiress brings Billionaire's water company into family fold." The article was worse than the headline, filled with quotes from Aunt Vivian about our Camila and how the Harringtons had always supported her unusual career path. There were vague allusions to potential investment opportunities and family connections that would benefit both organizations. I didn't. I struggled to find words, mortification washing over me. "I know," Gabriel said quietly, "which is why I wanted to show you before you heard about it elsewhere." I sank onto the couch, scanning the article with growing horror. They've completely fabricated this narrative, as if my position at Aqua Vita is some family brokered arrangement. "The reporter should have verified with you or the company directly," Gabriel noted, his tone controlled but clearly displeased. "We've already issued a clarification statement, but I thought you should be prepared. The humiliation was acute, not because of what the Harringtons had done, but because it might appear to Gabriel that I had somehow encouraged or enabled their presumption. Gabriel, I want to be absolutely clear. I never suggested to any of my family that—" He raised a hand, cutting off my rushed explanation. "Camila, I know who you are. I've watched your work for months. You earned your position through talent and dedication, not family connections. The fact that your family is now trying to capitalize on your achievement says everything about them, and nothing about you." His words were a balm to the sting of betrayal, but the article still represented a professional embarrassment. "Will this affect how the Aqua Vita team perceives me?" "Only if we let it," he replied firmly. "Which we won't. Monday morning, our PR team will release your official appointment announcement, highlighting your qualifications and previous work. The narrative will be clear. Camila Harrington, Director of Global Initiatives, earned her position through expertise and innovation." I nodded, grateful for his support but still shaken. "I should call Aunt Vivian." "That's your decision," he said carefully, "but consider whether it would change anything." I thought about Aunt Vivian's decades of calculated social maneuvering, of using people as stepping stones to enhance the Harrington name. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate strategy to insert themselves into what they perceived as a valuable connection. "You're right," I said finally. "It wouldn't change anything." Gabriel sat beside me, respecting my space, but offering his presence as support. Sometimes the most powerful response isn't confrontation or explanation. It's simply moving forward, on your own terms. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the city lights twinkling beyond the windows. Finally, I straightened my shoulders, a decision crystallizing. "I want to visit the Singapore office tomorrow," I said. "Meet the team. See the workspace. Start as I mean to continue." He smiled, approval warming his expression. "I can arrange that. The engineering team would be delighted to meet you before your official start date." That night, as I prepared for bed, I checked my phone to find it flooded with messages from Harrington relatives. Congratulatory texts. That felt hollow. Questions about Gabriel that bordered on invasive. Hints about business introductions and networking opportunities. I silenced the notifications without responding. Instead, I opened my email and composed a short, clear message. To Aunt Vivian. "I've seen the Boston Business Monthly article. To be absolutely clear, there is no partnership between the Harrington Foundation and Aquavita. My position was earned through my professional qualifications, not family connections. Please issue a correction immediately. Any further public statements about my career or Aquavita will be addressed through legal channels." I didn't add pleasantries or soften the message with family sentiment. For once, I didn't shrink myself to make room for Harrington sensibilities. After sending the email, I slept better than I had in years. The Aquavita Singapore headquarters occupied several floors of a stunning glass tower in the business district. As Gabriel led me through the workspace on Saturday morning, I was struck by the energy of the environment. Engineers huddled over designs, scientists discussing test results, project managers coordinating with teams across time zones. "This will be your office," Gabriel indicated a corner space with glass walls and a view of the harbor. "Though you'll probably spend as much time in the research lab and the project rooms." "It's perfect," I said, picturing myself working in this dynamic, purpose-driven environment. Throughout the morning, Gabriel introduced me to key team members who would be reporting to me. Each greeted me with respect based on familiarity with my work, not my last name. Dr. Lin from the filtration team had questions about my Cambodia implementation. Raj from engineering wanted to discuss modifications to the system design for urban settings. Not once did anyone mention the Harringtons or ask about Gabriel and me. It was, I realized, what true professional recognition felt like. Being valued for what you'd built, not who you knew or where you came from. We were touring the research laboratory when Gabriel received another call. This time when he returned, his expression was grimly satisfied. "Your aunt has retracted the statements," he informed me. "The magazine has published a correction noting that there is no formal or informal partnership between the organizations." Relief washed over me. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Your email did it," he replied. "Apparently, she didn't expect you to stand your ground so firmly." The Harringtons never had. That was what had allowed the pattern to persist for so long. My acceptance of their dismissal, my gratitude for crumbs of inclusion, my silence in the face of their revisionist family narrative. No more. As we completed the office tour, I felt a profound sense of alignment with my work, my worth, my future. The Singapore team had welcomed me based on merit, not manipulation. They'd respected my boundaries and expertise without requiring family credentials or social connections. This, I realized, was what belonging actually felt like. That evening, Gabriel arranged a dinner with several key team members and their spouses at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the bay. The conversation flowed easily, covering professional challenges, cultural differences, favorite local experiences. No one attempted to establish social hierarchies or drop important names. Success was measured in problems solved and communities served, not fortunes amassed or connections leveraged. To Camila, Dr. Lin raised her glass in a toast midway through the meal. "Your Cambodia filtration design saved our team months of work. We're lucky to have you joining us." Others joined the toast, each mentioning specific contributions I'd made to the field. There was no mention of the Harrington name, no reference to Boston society, no subtle reminders of my place in someone else's hierarchy. I caught Gabriel watching me across the table, a quiet understanding in his gaze. He saw what this moment meant: recognition based on substance, not surname. The weekend continued with more apartment preparations, neighborhood explorations, and practical arrangements for my relocation. By Sunday evening, as we prepared to return to Boston, Singapore no longer felt like an unknown destination, but a place of possibility. On the flight back, Gabriel and I reviewed the coming week's timeline, my resignation period at the current job, the logistics of shipping belongings, the required documentation for international relocation. "Nervous?" he asked as we began our descent into Boston. "Less than I expected," I admitted, "though I'm not looking forward to dealing with the Harrington fallout." His expression grew thoughtful. "You know, you don't have to engage with it at all." "What do you mean?" "The power of presence versus absence," he explained. "Sometimes the most effective response isn't confrontation, but redirection of energy. The Harringtons are used to you reacting, either accepting their dismissal or now pushing back against their appropriation. But what if you simply moved forward?" I considered his words. "Stop playing the game entirely." "Exactly. Not angry, not bitter, just focused elsewhere." As the plane touched down in Boston, returning me to familiar ground that suddenly felt less like home, I realized Gabriel was right. The Harringtons would continue their attempts to insert themselves into my success story, to retroactively claim they'd always supported me, to suggest they'd somehow facilitated my rise. Fighting each instance would drain energy I could direct toward actual impact. The car was waiting as we exited the private terminal. Gabriel's driver would take me home first, then continue to Gabriel's hotel. "Thank you for this weekend," I said as we pulled up to my apartment building, "for showing me Singapore, but more importantly, for helping me see things clearly." He smiled. "You would have found clarity with or without me, Camila. You've been working toward this moment for years, the moment when you finally saw your worth through your own eyes, not theirs." His words resonated with a truth I was just beginning to fully embrace. Still, I'm grateful our paths crossed. As am I. His gaze held mine for a moment longer than strictly professional. "I'll see you tomorrow? The contract signing?" I nodded. Tomorrow. As I entered my apartment, I was greeted by the now familiar blinking of my phone. More messages from Harringtons and their associates. Aunt Vivian had called 6 times. Uncle Richard had left 3 voicemails. Even Eliza had texted repeatedly, asking for updates about the Singapore trip with barely disguised interest in my relationship with Gabriel. I set the phone aside without responding, choosing instead to unpack my suitcase and prepare for the week ahead. Their messages would keep. Their urgency was not mine to absorb. Monday morning, I arrived at my office to find a delivery man waiting with another elaborate flower arrangement. This one ostentatious roses rather than elegant orchids. The card bore Aunt Vivian's distinctive monogram. "Just a misunderstanding. Darling, let's discuss over lunch this week. Johnny's at noon Thursday? V." I placed the card on my desk, neither accepting nor declining the invitation yet. First, I would complete my morning's work, sign the Aquavita contract, begin the visa application process, prioritize what actually mattered. Layla appeared at my office door, eyebrows raised at the extravagant flowers. "Guess who saw Boston Business Monthly? The retraction is almost more interesting than the original article." I groaned. "Has everyone read it?" "Only those of us who follow rich people drama," she replied cheerfully, dropping into the chair across from my desk. "So, lunch?" "I want all the Singapore details, especially the non-professional ones." I smiled, grateful for friendship without agenda. "Deal." But first, I have a contract to sign. The morning passed quickly as I finalized paperwork, answered emails, and continued transitioning my projects. At precisely 11 a.m., Gabriel arrived for the formal contract signing. As we completed the paperwork that would officially make me Aquavita's new Director of Global Initiatives, I felt a profound sense of rightness, of stepping into a role earned through dedication rather than inherited or granted through connection. "Welcome to Aquavita," Gabriel said formally, extending his hand. As I shook it, completing the professional ritual, I realized something important. This moment of achievement felt complete in itself. I didn't need the Harringtons to witness it, acknowledge it, or retroactively claim credit for it. Their approval or disapproval had become irrelevant to my sense of accomplishment. That realization, that freedom from external validation, was perhaps the most significant breakthrough of all. The next 3 weeks passed in a whirlwind of preparations. During the day, I methodically transitioned my projects at the startup, documenting processes and training my replacement, a bright young engineer named Priya, who approached water filtration with the same passion I had brought to the role years earlier. Evenings and weekends were dedicated to sorting my belongings, shipping necessities to Singapore, and saying goodbye to the few close friends who had formed my chosen family in Boston. Through it all, the Harringtons continued their campaign of renewed interest in my life. Aunt Vivian sent daily messages, each more insistent than the last. Uncle Richard attempted to schedule strategic discussions about my future. Even cousins who had barely acknowledged my existence at family gatherings suddenly discovered urgent reasons to connect. I responded to each outreach with the same polite but firm message. I was focused on my relocation and would be in touch after I settled in Singapore. No timelines, no promises. Just enough acknowledgement to avoid outright confrontation without inviting further intrusion. It was Eliza who finally broke through my carefully constructed boundary, appearing unannounced at my apartment one evening as I packed the last of my books. "You're really doing it," she said, surveying the half-empty shelves and stacked boxes. "Actually moving across the world." I set down the packing tape. "I am." She wandered through the apartment, touching objects as if seeing them. Seeing my life for the first time. In a way, she was. "I always thought you'd stay in Boston," she admitted. "That you'd eventually join the family business somehow. Maybe handle the foundation's environmental initiatives." "That was never my plan," I replied quietly. She nodded, picking up a framed photo of my parents. "They would be proud of you, you know. Aunt Melissa and Uncle James. They always did. Things their own way, too." The mention of my parents surprised me. The Harringtons rarely spoke of my mother after she'd chosen love over family expectations, and my father had always been regarded as the reason for her unfortunate choices. "Thank you for saying that," I said carefully. Eliza set down the photograph. "I came because—" She hesitated, seeming to struggle with her words, something I'd rarely seen from my polished, perfect cousin. "I wanted to apologize. For the wedding. For all of it, really." I waited, not rushing to make this easier for her. "When you walked into the reception alone, I didn't stop Jeremy from making that toast. I laughed, Camila. I actually laughed." She looked genuinely distressed at the memory. "And then when Gabriel Chen walked in and went straight to you, I was shocked. Not just because of who he is, but because of how he looked at you, with this respect I'd never given you." "Eliza, no, please, let me finish." She took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about it ever since. About how we've treated you. About why we treated you that way. And I realized something ugly about myself." She met my eyes directly. "I think I needed you to be less so I could feel like more. We all did. The charity case cousin made the rest of us feel more secure in our positions. And that's terrible, Camila. It's unforgivable. Her candor caught me off guard. Of all the Harrington responses I had anticipated, genuine self-reflection hadn't been among them. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because you're leaving," she said simply. And I realized I might never get another chance to say, to acknowledge that I see what we did. What I did. I nodded slowly, absorbing her words. "I appreciate that. I don't expect forgiveness," she added quickly, "or for this to suddenly fix everything. I needed you to know that at least one of us sees it now." We stood in silence for a moment, the weight of years settling between us. Not erased, but acknowledged. "Would you like some tea?" I offered finally. "I haven't packed the kettle yet." She smiled hesitantly. "I'd like that." For the next hour, Eliza and I sat in my half-packed apartment, drinking tea and having what felt like our first genuine conversation. She asked real questions about my work, listening intently to my explanations of filtration technology and implementation challenges. I inquired about her honeymoon and her plans with Jackson. We weren't suddenly best friends, but we were, perhaps for the first time, authentic with each other. As she prepared to leave, Eliza paused at the door. "The family is hosting a goodbye dinner for you next week. Mother's planning it as we speak. Formal invitations, preferred seating, the works." I sighed. "Eliza, I don't think—" "I know," she interrupted. "You don't owe us that. But I'm telling you so you can decide on your own terms. Whether you come or not, whether you bring Gabriel or not, it should be your choice, not something we manipulate you into." Her words reflected a new awareness, a shift in perspective that surprised me. Thank you for that. After she left, I sat among my packed boxes, contemplating the Harrington goodbye dinner. Once I would have attended dutifully, grateful for the inclusion, hopeful it signified a genuine change. Now I recognized it for what it was, a last attempt to establish themselves in my narrative, to create a memory where they had blessed my departure rather than driven it. I texted Gabriel. "The Harringtons are planning a formal goodbye dinner next week. Thoughts?" His response came quickly. "Your decision entirely. But remember, you don't need a grand exit to move forward." He was right, of course. Closure didn't require ceremonial acknowledgement from the very people who had created the wounds. Sometimes it came from simply taking the next step on your own path. The formal invitation arrived the following day. Heavy cardstock, gold embossing, my name spelled correctly for once. I placed it on my kitchen counter without opening it, a physical representation of the choice before me. Engage with the Harrington narrative one final time, or begin writing my own story without their epilogue. That evening, my phone rang with a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Hello? Camila Harrington?" The voice was unfamiliar, professional. "Yes, speaking. This is Martin Reynolds from the Boston Globe. I'm writing a feature on local talent making global impact, and your name came up regarding your new position at Aquavita Global. Would you be available for an interview?" I hesitated, immediately suspicious. "How did you hear about my appointment?" "Gabriel Chen's office sent a press release this morning. Standard procedure for executive appointments. But your background caught my attention. Boston native using water engineering to create global change. Makes for a compelling local angle." Not the Harringtons, then. This was legitimate professional recognition, initiated by Aquavita's PR team. "I'd be happy to speak with you," I said. "But I should clarify. While I grew up in Boston, my work is what defines me, not my family connections." "Of course," he replied. "This piece would focus on your professional achievements and vision for expanding Aquavita's impact. Though I would need some biographical background, education, career path, that sort of thing." "I understand. When would you like to conduct the interview?" We scheduled a time for the following afternoon. After ending the call, I texted Gabriel to confirm the press release had indeed come from Aquavita. His response was characteristically straightforward. Standard announcement for director-level appointments. We're proud to have you joining the team and want the industry to know it. Pride based on achievement, not association. Recognition of work, not name. The contrast to the Harrington approach couldn't have been clearer. The interview with Martin Reynolds the next day was refreshingly focused on substance, my engineering, innovations, implementation challenges in developing regions, vision for expanding access to clean water. When he asked about my background, I spoke briefly about my education and early career influences. "And your family?" he inquired. The Harrington name is well known in Boston business circles. "My parents were my greatest influence," I replied. "My father was a literature professor who taught me to question everything, and my mother was an artist who showed me how to see problems from multiple perspectives. Their approach to life shapes my work every day." It was a truthful answer that redirected the narrative. Martin nodded, making notes, and moved on to questions about the Singapore projects. As the interview concluded, he asked one final question. "What would you say to young women considering careers in environmental engineering or water technology?" I considered carefully before answering. I'd tell them that impact doesn't require permission or pedigree. That the problems facing our world, water scarcity, climate change, resource inequality, don't care about your last name or social connections. They only respond to innovation, persistence, and courage. And I'd tell them that finding your value through the difference you make is far more fulfilling than finding it through others' perceptions. Martin smiled as he closed his notebook. "That's a powerful perspective, Ms. Harrington. Thank you for your time." The article appeared 3 days later, a thoughtful profile highlighting my technical innovations and global vision, with only a passing mention of the Harrington name in a single sentence about my Boston upbringing. The accompanying photo showed me in the research lab, explaining a filtration prototype to colleagues. Professional, substantive, focused on contribution rather than connection. The Harringtons' reaction was swift and predictable. Aunt Vivian called within hours of publication, her voice honeyed with pride as if she had personally engineered both the article and my career. "Darling, you should have told us about the interview. We could have provided family photos, background about your early aptitude. I've already called Martin to offer additional context for any follow-up pieces." I closed my eyes briefly, centering myself. "There won't be follow-up pieces, Aunt Vivian. And the article wasn't about the Harringtons. It was about water technology and global access." "Of course, dear, but context matters. People want to know where promising talent comes from. Speaking of which, we haven't received your RSVP for the farewell dinner. I've seated Gabriel next to Uncle Richard. They'll have so much to discuss about potential synergies." The presumption was breathtaking in its consistency. "I won't be attending the dinner," I said calmly. "My schedule before departure is quite full." A weighted pause. "Camila, this is important to the family. Everyone will be there." "Everyone except me," I replied, keeping my tone gentle but firm. "I appreciate the thought, but I've already made my own farewell plans." "With who?" The question was sharp, disbelieving. "With the people who have supported my journey all along," I answered. "My colleagues, my friends, my chosen family." Another pause, longer this time. When Aunt Vivian spoke again, her voice had lost its sweetness, revealing the steel beneath. "This isn't like you, Camila. You've changed." "I've grown," I corrected. "There's a difference." After ending the call, I felt a curious lightness. Not the vindictive satisfaction of rejecting the Harringtons, but the peaceful release of no longer requiring their approval or inclusion. I had declined their dinner not out of spite, but out of authentic choice. The choice to spend my remaining time with people who valued me consistently, not conditionally. The following evening, Layla organized a small gathering at her apartment. Just 8 people who had truly been part of my Boston journey. We ordered takeout from our favorite Ethiopian restaurant, drank good wine, and shared stories without pretense or performance. When they presented me with a parting gift, a custom-designed water filtration model rendered in crystal, each person's name etched into a component, I was moved to tears. "So you remember who believed in you from the beginning," Layla explained, hugging me tightly. This was what family could be: chosen, supportive, celebrating your growth rather than constraining it to fit predetermined expectations. The days continued to pass, each bringing me closer to departure. I declined 3 more Harrington invitations, each more insistent than the last. Uncle Richard attempted to schedule a private business lunch to discuss significant opportunities. That couldn't wait. Jeremy suggested a casual cousin dinner, where he could introduce some interested investors. Even Eliza, despite our moment of connection, forwarded an invitation to the Foundation's annual gala, where they planned to honor my contribution to environmental causes. I declined each with the same gentle firmness. My focus was on preparation for Singapore. Perhaps after I was settled. 2 days before my departure, I met Gabriel for dinner at a quiet restaurant overlooking the harbor. The evening air was crisp with early autumn, the water reflecting city lights like scattered stars. "Are you ready?" he asked as we settled at our table. "For Singapore? Yes. For whatever the Harringtons might try next? I'm not sure anyone could be fully prepared for that." He smiled. "They're persistent. I'll give them that. My office received another call from your uncle today. Something about a joint venture opportunity he wanted to discuss before you left." I groaned. "I'm sorry they keep dragging you into this." "Don't apologize for them," he reminded me gently. "Besides, their persistence is almost impressive. Most people would have accepted the new boundaries by now." "The Harringtons aren't—" "Most people," I sighed. "Especially when it comes to potential social or financial advantages they think they're entitled to." Gabriel studied me for a moment. "May I ask you something personal?" I nodded, curious. "What do you actually want from them? Not what you don't want. I think that's clear. But what would genuine resolution look like for you?" The question caught me off guard with its insight. What did I want from the Harringtons? For years, I had sought their approval, their recognition, their inclusion. Even my recent boundaries had been, in some ways, responses to their actions rather than independent choices. "I think," I said slowly, "I want to be neutral about them. Not angry, not hurt, not seeking validation, just at peace with the reality of who they are and who I am. I want to think of them and feel nothing particularly strong in any direction." Gabriel nodded. "Emotional freedom." "Exactly," I agreed, the concept crystallizing. Not cutting ties dramatically or maintaining artificial closeness, just authentic distance. "Then perhaps," he suggested, "the final step isn't confrontation or explanation, but simple presence in your own life. Complete the transition, not just physically to Singapore, but emotionally to a life where they occupy only the space you choose to give them." His perspective resonated deeply. The Harringtons had dominated my emotional landscape for so long, first through their dismissal, now through their sudden interest. True freedom would come not from rejecting them, but from genuinely moving beyond the need for either their approval or my reaction to its absence. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for seeing this so clearly." "I've had my own journey with family expectations," he acknowledged. "Different circumstances, but similar struggles with defining success and worth on my own terms." Our conversation shifted to Singapore plans, upcoming projects, and the integration of my research with Aqua Vita's existing initiatives. As we talked, I realized how comfortable this felt. Discussing ideas that mattered with someone who valued substance over status, impact over impression. The evening ended with Gabriel walking me to my car. As we reached it, he handed me a small package, A going-away gift, he explained. Though since I'll see you in Singapore next week, it's more of a transition gift. I unwrapped it carefully to find a beautiful journal bound in soft blue leather. Opening it, I discovered the first page inscribed with a quote. "The meaning of life is to find your gift. The purpose of life is to give it away." Beneath it, Gabriel had written, "Your gift changes lives across continents. It's an honor to help you share it with the world." The simplicity and sincerity of the gesture touched me deeply. "Thank you," I said, meeting his eyes. "For this and for everything these past weeks have brought. Thank you for trusting." "This new path," he replied. "Safe travels, Camila. I'll see you in Singapore." As we said goodnight, I felt a sense of anticipation that had nothing to do with the Harringtons or their approval. Just the genuine excitement of stepping into a future aligned with my values and vision. My final day in Boston dawned clear and cool, the city outlined against a brilliant blue sky as if ensuring I remembered its beauty. I spent the morning completing last-minute tasks, confirming my flight, securing my apartment, forwarding my mail. By afternoon, everything was ready. My suitcases stood by the door, my carry-on packed with essentials. All that remained was the drive to the airport. I was just double-checking my passport when the doorbell rang. Opening it, I found Eliza standing there alone, without the usual Harrington entourage. "I know you're leaving soon," she said quickly. "I just wanted to say goodbye properly." I hesitated, then stepped back to let her in. "I'm almost ready to go, but I have a few minutes." She entered cautiously, taking in the empty apartment. "It's really happening." "It really is," I confirmed. Eliza handed me a small gift bag. "This isn't from the family. It's just from me." Inside, I found a silver compass, elegantly crafted but not ostentatious. When I opened it, I discovered an inscription inside the lid. "Find your true north." It was Grandma Eleonora's, Eliza explained, before she married into the Harrington family and became, well, a Harrington. She was an explorer in her own way, one of the first women to study anthropology at Radcliffe. The family narrative kind of erased that part of her, but I found her journals in the attic last year. I ran my finger over the compass, surprised by the thoughtfulness of the gift and the history behind it. "Thank you, Eliza. This is meaningful. I thought you should have it. Someone in the family should remember there's more to legacy than money and status." She met my eyes directly. "The family is wrong about you, Camila. They always have been. And I'm sorry it took Gabriel Chen walking into that wedding for me to see it." The acknowledgement was simple but profound. Not a dramatic apology scene or tearful reconciliation, just honest recognition of truth. "I appreciate that," I said quietly. "I don't expect us to suddenly become close," she continued. "Too much has happened for that. But I wanted you to know that at least one Harrington sees you clearly now and respects the path you're creating. We didn't hug or make elaborate promises to stay in touch. Instead, we simply acknowledged a shift in understanding, not complete healing, but a step toward something more authentic than what had come before." After Eliza left, I stood in my empty apartment one last time, the compass in my hand, Gabriel's, journal in my bag, and the future ahead, clear but unwritten. The Harringtons would continue their lives in Boston, maintaining their social hierarchies and status concerns. They might even continue attempting to insert themselves into my narrative. But I was no longer defined by their acceptance or rejection. My worth wasn't measured by their perception. My path wasn't determined by their expectations. As my rideshare driver loaded my suitcases for the airport, I took one final look at the city that had shaped me. Not with regret or resentment, but with quiet acknowledgement of both the challenges and gifts it had provided. Boston had been my beginning, but it wouldn't define my becoming. On the drive to the airport, My phone buzzed with one final Harrington intrusion. A group text from Aunt Vivian to the extended family. Wishing our Camila safe travels as she brings Harrington excellence to Singapore. The family is so proud of her partnership with Gabriel Chen's company. We look forward to exploring international opportunities together. Farewell dinner rescheduled for her first visit home. Once, the presumption and misrepresentation would have frustrated me. Now, I simply turned off notifications and slipped the phone into my bag. My response wasn't needed. My energy was better directed toward what lay ahead. Singapore International. Airport was a testament to human ingenuity. Soaring architecture, seamless technology, gardens and waterfalls integrated into functional spaces. As I navigated through customs and collected my luggage, I felt a sense of alignment I hadn't experienced before. This new chapter wasn't about escaping the Harringtons, it was about embracing my own vision. A driver waited in the arrivals hall, holding a sign with my name, just my first name, Camila, written in simple black letters. No family affiliation, no status markers, just the name that belonged to me alone. "Welcome to Singapore, Ms. Harrington," he said as he took my bags. "Mr. Chen asked me to give you this." He handed me an envelope containing a handwritten note. "Camila, welcome to your new beginning. Take today to rest and settle in. Your team is excited to start working with you tomorrow, but today is yours to claim this new space as home. The driver will take you to your apartment, where everything is prepared for your arrival. There's a local phone on the kitchen counter with my number programmed in if you need anything at all. Your journey to this point has required more courage than most will ever understand. Remember that as you begin this chapter, you've already proven your strength by claiming your own path. See you tomorrow, Gabriel." As the car pulled away from the airport, carrying me toward my new home, I felt a profound sense of possibility. The Harringtons had laughed when I walked alone into that wedding, seeing only what I lacked rather than what I carried within me. They had frozen when Gabriel walked in, suddenly recalculating my value based on association rather than essence. But what came next wasn't about them at all. It was about the woman who had found the courage to define herself beyond family expectations. The engineer who had created solutions that brought clean water to communities across continents. The person who had finally understood that true worth isn't inherited or granted by others. It's built through purpose, integrity, and the courage to follow your own compass. As Singapore unfolded outside the car windows, a vibrant blend of innovation and tradition, ambition and heritage, I opened Eliza's compass, watching the needle settle toward true north. My direction was clear now, not because someone else had defined it, but because I had finally recognized it for myself. The Harringtons had taught me an unexpected lesson, that sometimes the greatest gift in life isn't being embraced by the people you thought you needed, but discovering you are complete without their validation. That belonging doesn't always look like inclusion in someone else's world, but rather creating a world where your authentic self is enough, more than enough. The future stretched before me, full of purpose and possibility. Not because a billionaire had walked into a wedding and changed the narrative, but because I had finally embraced the truth that had been there all along. My value was never determined by who stood beside me, but by what I stood for. And that was a foundation no one could ever take away. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.